Hello, my name is Caitlin Walker, and my presentation is on foreign policy and Christianity. What is foreign policy? Foreign policy is how the United States conducts relationships with other countries. Most of the time, these relationships are to suit the interests of the United States. Foreign policy is meant to empower and protect the interests of the United States. It involves all three branches of government. They all come together to decide which policy is going to be put into play. World War I was from 1914 to 1918. For the first 3 years of the war, the United States stayed out of it. They didn't want to be involved with any foreign affairs. But eventually they did join the war for two reasons. One reason that was that Germany was sinking submarines found near Great Britain without any warning. Some of these submarines had American people on them. And the other reason was when the United States found out about the Zimmerman telegram, which was Germany asking Mexico to join the war, and in return for helping them, Germany would help Mexico get some of their land back from the United States. Of course, it just didn't sit well with them. So the United States went to war against Germany. With a lot of help from Wilson, this war was won pretty peacefully. No one actually really won the war. It was kind of just an agreement to quit and move on, in a sense. After the war was over, Wilsonism was the new thing in the United States. It opposed imperialism, war, and evolution. It was an ideal put in by Wilson. It's how he helped win the war, and he wanted to move forward in the United States with that same idea. After the war, at the Versailles Peace Conference, the Treaty of Paris was established, which required Germany to pay back, or to pay for all the reparations, and it stripped them of 10% of their population and their territory. This was more or less Wilson's idea to do this because France and Europe just wanted to completely destroy and weaken Germany after what they had done. Unfortunately, there were issues with Germany paying for the reparations. So they implemented the Dawes Plan, in which Germany could pay back on like a payment system. And the United States had even told Germany that they would loan them money to help them rebuild and restructure their weakened economy after the war, but the United States realized that Germany wasn't going to pay them back, and then the Young Plan was put into effect, and it reduced the amount of German debt, and it financed some of the debt remaining. Overall, in World War I, instead of being vindictive and trying to get back at Germany for what they had done and causing the war, the United States was very fair, and they were very forgiving. Even when Germany wasn't paying for what they were supposed to pay for, the United States was still there to help them out and try to get them through it without any complete devastation in their country like Europe and France wanted. Following World War I was World War II. It was from 1939 to 1945. At the end of World War I, Wilson had this great idea for peace and keeping the peace throughout all of the countries, but that didn't exactly go out as planned. All of the three countries that were involved in World War I, which were Germany, Japan, and Italy, were now having issues of their own. Again, the United States didn't want to get involved in any foreign conflict. There were actually neutrality acts passed that kept the president from getting involved. The first Neutrality Act banned the export of arms, ammunition, and implements of war from the United States to foreign nation wars, so they weren't able to help anyone out. And the second Neutrality Act said that U.S. citizens were not allowed to travel on ships flying the flag of a country at war, and it prevented U.S. ships from providing warring countries with weapons. So the United States was staying out of it. They didn't want to be a part of this war, just like they didn't want to be a part of the First World War. But eventually he had a change of heart, or the United States had a change of heart, and they started helping out. They started making allies with Great Britain. They protested Germany about its persecution of Jews. They loaned money to China in its struggle with Japan, and they even permitted France to purchase U.S.-made warplanes. He now had permission from Congress to change the Neutrality Acts, which gave him permission to sell arms to warring states. Although they were still technically staying out of the war, the best they could, the United States was building allies with Great Britain and helping them out. Just like in World War I, when Germany was sinking submarines, the United States was now doing the same thing for Great Britain and the neutrality zone. But unfortunately for them, Germany, Italy, and Japan were also forming an alliance, and they were agreeing to back each other if a country not involved in the war already came after them, which obviously was aimed at the United States. When Japan was trying to move in on China some more, the United States froze trade with Japan and backed Japan into a corner. So Japan launched attacks on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and that's when the United States entered World War II. Once they entered, it was game over. They won in Europe. They won the war. It was ultimately won when they got Japan to give up by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that was the end of World War II. Following World War II was the Cold War. It was from 1945 to 1989. The Cold War was basically a face-off between the United States and the Soviet Union about who had the better bombs and such. With the Cold War, the whole point of everything was to stop the spread of communism. The Soviet Union was setting up pro-communist regimes in Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Albania, East Germany, and in other places, and the United States was very against the spread of communism, and they were holding on to their idea of containment. They wanted to contain it where it was and not let it spread any further, such as into Western Germany. So the United States got involved in this war to stop the spread. They wanted to hold on to democracy and promote democracy. So after World War II, they were deciding to help, which is why they got involved, because they didn't want to spread communism. So by doing this, they were eventually able to contain communism. There was never a full-scale war. Both the United States and its allies and the Soviet Union and its allies were both having a face-off and holding their weapons up, but no one ever actually got into a fight. It wasn't until between 1977 and 1989, when Carter and Reagan were president, that things got better. Them, as well as the Soviet Union leader Gorbachev, they got together and they were able to improve their relations between the two countries. The Soviet Union introduced reforms that involved domestic, foreign, and military policies and the leaders of the two countries agreed to eliminate intermediate nuclear forces. If it wasn't for the agreements and the peacemaking between these two officials, then the war would have never ended and it would have just kept being a standoff. September 11th, 2011 is when 4 airplanes were hijacked. 2 of them were crashed into the World Trade Center, 1 of them into the Pentagon, and 1 of them never made it to its destination. Immediately after the war on terrorism began, the Bush administration went after the Taliban to try and get them to hand over bin Laden, but when that didn't go out as planned and they refused, Bush initiated a massive airstrike against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and they offered assistance to the anti-Taliban forces to get back at them for not giving him up. All around the world, the war had moved, and it was no longer just in Afghanistan. Around the world, 1,000 people had been detained, but it was estimated that there were still 5,000 to 10,000 Al-Qaeda operatives out running loose. So their tactics weren't really working. They needed to figure something else out in order to avoid more terrorism. So in 2002, the Bush administration wrote up preemptive defense, which is when the United States would act against emerging threats before they were fully formed. It had its opposers and it had its people who were for it, but ultimately Bush wanted to act before anything else could happen. He didn't want to be able to let terrorists and other threats be able to strike first. After September 11th, the United States was focused on 3 main points of foreign policy: defending the homeland, prosecuting a global war on terrorism, and preventing rogue states and terrorist groups from obtaining weapons of mass destruction. After this, the United States was more cautious than ever. Airports are now highly secure. There's security after security that you have to go through when you go into an airport and when you go into plenty of other places. Even Disneyland now, you have to go through metal detectors. The September 11th event really changed foreign policy, and it really changed the security of the United States.